Hello, everyone, and welcome to 1L of a Ride, the top 5 habits of successful law students with Professor Andrew McClurg and hosted by the American Bar Association Law Student Division and West Academic. Our speaker, Professor McClurg, holds the HERF Chair of Excellence at the University of Memphis Cecil C. Humphrey School of Law. He has taught thousands of law students at 6 law schools and received numerous awards for both teaching and research. His law school prep book, 1L of a Ride, A Well-Traveled Professor's Roadmap to Success in the First Year of Law School, is recommended or required reading at many law schools. With that, we'll turn it over to Professor McClurg.
Good afternoon. I'm Professor Andrew McClurg. Welcome to my webinar for new law students, which will focus on the top 5 habits of successful law students. I'm coming to you live from my office at the beautiful University of Memphis Cecil C. Humphrey School of Law. Last year, Pre-Law magazine named our building the #1 law school facility in the United States. As Emily, the moderator, mentioned, I'm the author of a law school prep book called 1L of a Ride, A Well-Traveled Professor's Roadmap to the First Year of Law School. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've even read it. This spring, I was excited to see the release of the 1L of a Ride video course based on the book. We had a blast filming it in sunny Southern California, where they treated us like movie stars. We even had a makeup artist. Regrettably, for me, makeup can only do so much. I had hoped to show you a couple of the videos in this webinar, but the gods of internet bandwidth would not cooperate. So instead, you'll be seeing a few screenshots as I speak. The 13-part video series covers these topics. It features a truly all-star cast. Professor Chris Coughlin from the Wake Forest School of Law. Professor Meredith Duncan from the University of Houston Law School. Professor Nancy Levitt from the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law. Then, of course, we have this McClurg guy. He's a little sketchy. I'm not sure I can vouch for him. Seriously, it's a great group. Among the 4 of us, we've received more than 20 teaching awards. So if you're looking for a 2-hour introduction to law school, check out the video course. At 450 pages, the book, of course, contains a lot more detail. Today, I want to accomplish 2 things, and then take your questions. First, I want to give you a piece of advice that should be the #1 item on your pre-law school to-do list. Be excited. Start law school feeling proud about becoming part of a noble and honorable profession. Experience has shown time and again that lawyers are the only group with the conviction and courage to consistently stand up and fight for justice when it's unpopular to do so. Lawyers created the liberties we cherish and have fought to protect them for more than 200 years. 35 of the 55 framers of the U.S. Constitution were lawyers. How many were doctors? None. 26 of our nation's 43 presidents. 60% of U.S. presidents studied law. How many studied medicine? None. I'm not picking on doctors. I love doctors. But I love lawyers too and don't think they get enough credit. People think of doctors as the only life-saving profession. But make no mistake, lawyers have people's lives in their hands every day. For every person needing medical help, someone abused by a domestic partner, illegally imprisoned, or unfairly evicted by a landlord. Don't let people around you sour you on studying to be a lawyer. The public has a love-hate relationship with lawyers. They can't get enough of us in books, movies, and TV shows. On the other hand, you're going to learn that some people are quick to malign lawyers. Even total strangers may feel comfortable telling you lawyer jokes. True story. I once went on a canoeing trip with a group of law professors. First of all, you can imagine what a rollicking adventure that was. Oops! No, that's not really us. Anyway, the woman at the canoe rental place asked what I did, and I said, law professor. Without hesitating, she said, I hate lawyers. Without hesitating, I said, I hate people who rent canoes. She was shocked and appalled I would say something so rude. Although the irony escaped her, I felt good about standing up for my profession. Plus, I really do hate people who rent canoes. Seriously, lawyers aren't perfect, and there are rotten apples in the bin of every profession. But trust that the haters and joke tellers will be the first ones seeking your help when they get in trouble. Let the power of the law to right wrongs invigorate you. Let the grand tradition of lawyers in America make you proud. Law is power. Knowledge of law is empowering. So get ready to be unstoppable. Prepare to set the world on fire. Figuratively only, since that would be a tort. Be excited. If you're excited about law school, the workload will be much more tolerable and the experience much more satisfying. Now let's get down to some substance. Every student begins law school at the same starting line. Within weeks, days even, some students pull ahead while others fall behind. By the end of the year, at law schools all across America, the class is divided into GPA and class rank strata that include a top, middle, and bottom. What factors determine which group students end up in? The first answer of many people would be LSAT score, and that is one factor. Empirical studies do show a correlation between LSAT scores and first-year grades, but the correlation is not nearly as strong as most people believe. Correlation is measured by a coefficient for which 1.0 represents a perfect correlation, and 0 shows no correlation beyond 1 attributable to random chance. Generally speaking, variables aren't considered to be highly correlated unless the coefficient reaches or exceeds 0.7, although the context of what is being considered is important in evaluating the strength of correlations. The Law School Admission Council, the good folks who administer the LSAT, regularly conduct validity studies of the LSAT. The most recent data is from 2012. In 2012, the mean correlation between LSAT scores and first-year grades was a relatively weak 0.36. So as we see here, you should not enter law school believing your fate has been predetermined by your LSAT score. While the LSAT correlates with success for many students, it does not reliably predict the success of any individual student. The LSAT measures a limited range of skills, primarily the abilities to read, comprehend, and manage complex text. Those abilities are vitally important, but other key ingredients to law school success are not measured by the LSAT. In Memphis, we love our NBA team, the Grizzlies. Without any superstars, they've made the playoffs for 6 consecutive years. Their motto is grit and grind. Its origin is credited to tenacious guard Tony Allen, the grind father, who was asked to explain his outstanding performance in a surprise win over the Oklahoma City Thunder in 2011. All heart, he said, grit, grind. When a Memphis sports blog asked fans to define grit and grind, one captured it perfectly: the intrinsic spirit of struggling to beat whatever's stacked against you, persistence in the face of any obstacles. Now, Professor Angela Duckworth has written a best-selling book, Grit, where, based on a decade of research, she explains how and why grit, a combination of perseverance and single-minded passion, is as important as native intelligence in predicting its success. Duckworth began her research studying cadets at the West Point Military Academy. Despite elaborate efforts, the Academy simply was not able to predict which candidates would make it through West Point training and which would drop out. But then Duckworth came up with her grit scale, a test to measure the degree to which a person approaches life with grit. The grit scale turned out to be an astoundingly reliable predictor of success at West Point. Duckworth repeated her work with salespeople, high school students, spelling bee competitors, and other groups, always with the same result: grit trumped talent alone. Throughout my 3 decades as a law professor, I've watched grit prevail time and again. I've seen students with high LSAT scores flunk out and students with below average LSAT scores become law review editors and graduate in the top 10% of their class. When I asked a group of 1Ls what advice they would give to a close loved one starting law school, I received this reply from a student who wrote the top exam in torts. Do not let below average undergraduate GPA and LSAT scores discourage you from attending law school. I fell somewhere slightly below average in both, and I nearly decided that I shouldn't come to law school for fear that I wouldn't be able to pass. I spent the first month in constant worry of not being able to compete with classmates who had great LSAT scores. I ended up in the top 5 of my class after the first semester. My advice would be that if you want to go to law school, use below average entrance scores as motivation in improving your scores wrong, not as reasons you won't pass. Probably the most important chapter in my prep book, 1L of a Ride, is the C.R.E.D.O chapter, which explains the top 5 habits of successful law students. Those habits, consistent, rigorous, efficient, diligent, and organized, provide a framework to help any student harness the behavioral habits that add up to grit. The good news is that students have a lot more control over the C.R.E.D.O habits than they do over innate intellectual gifts. So here's a short description of the top 5 habits shared by successful law students. Identify the recurring theme in this list. The most successful law students read every assignment, attend every class, take good notes in every class, brief every case, outline every course. If you answered consistency, congratulations. You can now brag that you aced your first law school test. Successful law students are consistent from beginning to end. They don't skip a reading assignment because they were out late the night before. They don't miss a class unless absolutely necessary. They don't stop briefing their cases when they hit the wall of the first semester, which occurs somewhere between the 7th and 10th weeks. They recognize that the material covered at the end of the semester is just as important as the material at the beginning, probably more so. They don't give up after the first semester because they're disappointed by their grades. They understand that law school is a marathon, not a sprint. Their consistency gives them a clear edge over their classmates who are less consistent, even those who are more innately gifted. Why is consistency so important? Because a law school exam, there's usually only one per course, is only 3 or 4 hours long, yet covers the entire semester of material. For a 3-credit course, that's 42 class hours. A 4-credit course has 56 class hours. Do the math. How do professors test 42 or 56 hours of material in a 3 or 4 hour exam? They don't. They can't. Since there's no way to predict which material will end up on the exam, you have to learn all of it. Here's an interesting factoid. I dug up the first semester attendance records for 2 different entering classes and added up the absences of the students who finished in the top 10% on the exam and those who finished in the bottom 10%. The top 10% had a total of 2 absences among them for both entering classes combined. The bottom 10% registered 47 absences. To succeed at the highest level, you need to be consistent in your studying and preparation from the first day until the last day. Rigorous. Rigorous has several definitions. Here I use it to mean exacting or scrupulously right. You need to be rigorous in capturing and understanding the law. Legal language is precise. Loose language, vague definitions, or partial statements of legal standards are going to be wrong. Rigorously capturing and understanding the law will come, in large part, from following the other C.R.E.D.O components. Going back to consistency, if you miss one day of a 2-day discussion of an important doctrine, your understanding of that doctrine is not going to be rigorous. One way to describe the quality of being rigorous is that good students recognize the importance of paying attention to detail. They're not just in the ballpark, not just close enough for rock and roll. They get the law precisely right. Next in the credo is efficiency. So much to do, so little time to get it all done. Such is the life of a law student. With a typical load of 4 doctrinal courses and a time-consuming legal research and writing course, the plates of full-time students quickly fill up and begin overflowing. As a consequence, it should come as no surprise that most successful law students develop efficient time management skills. They establish schedules for getting things done and stick to them. Being efficient can enable students to succeed at a higher level than inefficient students who labor longer and harder. Think of efficiency as the ultimate and only officially approved shortcut method for law school success. The book contains much more detail, but here are 2 good efficiency tips. Don't waste time during the day, and prepare for every class, but don't over-prepare for any class. I discovered number 1 just 3 weeks into law school. I was working late into the night to prepare for the next day, and it was already getting to me. When I studied late, I'd end up dreaming about law school and working in my sleep. I woke up feeling tired and unrested. Then I realized how much time I was wasting during the day, talking to friends, playing ping pong in the student lounge. I decided to change plans. I began using every spare moment of the day productively. If I had an hour between classes, I used it to read for the next day. Within a couple of weeks, I had refined my system to the point where by the time I headed home, I had already finished most of my assignments for the next day. I missed spending more time with my friends at school, but the payoff came each night. I found myself with plenty of time to work on my legal research and writing projects and still have time to hang out and relax. Don't waste time during the day. The second tip is to prepare for every class, but don't over-prepare for any class. Class preparation, including case briefing, is essential to success. A case brief is a synopsis of the key points of a judicial opinion. 1L of a RIDE has a chapter on case briefing and gives you an opportunity to brief a real case. The video course also has a module on case briefing taught by Professor C.R.E.D.O. But some well-intentioned students actually spend too much time briefing cases, or waste time looking up every case cited in the textual notes after the main cases. A case brief that fills 2 pages may not be more helpful than a brief filling 1 page, or even a half a page. It may be less helpful if it contains too much irrelevant detail. Let this be your mantra. Prepare for every class. Remember consistency, but don't over-prepare for any class. Diligent. I use diligent to mean working hard and staying on task from day 1. The most frequently expressed reason I've heard from dismissed law students as to why they were unsuccessful is, I didn't understand, choose one, how much work was involved, what I was up against, the demands of law school, until it was too late. For any law school advice to help, you need to follow it from the very beginning. The material is too vast and complex to play catch-up. Here we see the overlap in the C.R.E.D.O habits. Diligence overlaps with both consistency and being organized. Many 1Ls are cursed by their previous educational successes. They arrive at law school having performed well in high school and undergraduate school without ever having to expend tremendous effort. When first semester grades are distributed, they're genuinely shocked to find they are now only average, or worse, barely hanging on to their status as students in good standing. How could this be, they ask? Often it's because they simply weren't as diligent as their more successful colleagues. At the end of the year, I ask students to list one thing they wish they had known when starting law school. Here's one of my favorite answers. You don't have to come from a family of legal scholars to do well in law school. Hard work is truly the great equalizer. Or as grindfather Tony Allen would put it, all heart, grit, grind. Last, but certainly not least in the C.R.E.D.O, is organized. The volume of the material and the single exam format demand it. It's a prerequisite for success. Being consistent, rigorous, efficient, and diligent all depend on having an organized approach and plan. Law school is one place where being a bit anal retentive or obsessive can be a benefit, at least assuming you're obsessing about the right things. Keep a detailed calendar from the moment you arrive. Write down everything, both specific events and time blocks for studying, working out, going to the grocery store, and whatever else you do. Don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I've got it all up here. Your law school life is going to be incredibly busy. In addition to keeping your schedule organized, keep your course materials organized, whether in computer folders or the old-fashioned way using 3-ring binders. Many students use both. The beauty of this is if you start out organized, it's a snap to stay that way. On the other hand, if you start out disorganized, you may never be able to pull everything together when you need it. Following the C.R.E.D.O habits will bolster any student's performance. The habits may seem obvious, but trust me when I say the majority of students do not follow all of them. The C.R.E.D.O habits come naturally to some people because of their personality type. If they don't come naturally to you, you're going to have to work at them. But you can. You have control over them. Check out the book for more details and examples about the C.R.E.D.O. Meanwhile, post the C.R.E.D.O on your refrigerator and take stock of it on a regular basis. One last thing before we open it for questions. West Academic Publishing, who's sponsoring this webinar, is offering 10% off on one L of a Ride titles and free shipping. That includes the paperback book, ebook, video course, and bundled book and video course. Just go to this link and put in the code 1L of a Ride. The offer is good until September 30th. And with that, we turn to the Q&A portion. But before we start, let me say this. Many questions about law school have more than one right answer because professors teach differently and students learn differently. I base all my advice on what I think will be most helpful to most students. Beware of anyone who insists that they know the only right answers about how to succeed in law school. And with that, we're ready for questions. Our moderator, Emily Roshek, is with us from Chicago. She's a graduate of the Chicago-Kent College of Law. Hi, Emily.
Hi, yes, thank you, Professor McClurg. I have some questions that are coming in from the audience. Let's start with the first one. It is, how would you advise striking the balance between hitting the ground running at the beginning of your 1L fall and avoiding burnout?
Great question. First, a couple of specific things. Don't burn yourself out at orientation. Students arrive so excited that some of them actually put too much into orientation, which, while important, doesn't count. As I say in the book, take orientation seriously, but not gravely. But I guess my biggest tip is what I said during the presentation. Prepare for every class, but don't over-prepare for any class. Case briefing, for example, is important because it teaches you how to analyze a case. But some students burn themselves out early by spending too much time writing overly long and detailed briefs. Sticking with the marathon analogy, you want to keep a steady pace from beginning to end. You don't start a marathon sprinting because you'll fade way before the end, right? Same with law school. Slow and steady wins the race. I tell that to my students all the time.
Okay, next question is, what is the most common mistake that 1Ls make?
Gosh, they make so many. It's hard to come up with just one. Seriously, if I had to name one, I guess I'd go back to being inconsistent. They'll prepare hard for some classes and skip others, but that doesn't work because of the single exam format. And related, which I also touched on, many of them simply do not do the work they need to do to maximize the potential for academic success. They'll stop briefing cases, rely on old outlines, and try to take shortcuts. Shortcuts don't work in law school.
Okay, and then what are some key characteristics of 1L law school exams that make them so difficult?
Another good question. I suppose the best way to say it is that the main difference is that in most undergraduate courses, a student who studies hard can go into an exam and feel confident, justly so, that she'll perform well. Unfortunately, this is not the case in law school exams, at least not always. I guess we could say studying hard is what we call a necessary condition to success, but not a sufficient condition. The reason is that law school exams don't just test knowledge. That's only one component. They test the ability to spot legal issues and solve them through analysis. Some students know the rules but can't spot issues well. Some students spot the issues but never really analyze them. So that's a big difference. Knowledge by itself isn't enough to succeed. Many professors also give multiple choice questions. Good news, right? But these are also very different from the questions students are familiar with. Law school multiple choice questions are often patterned after the type used on the multi-state bar examination, given in every state except I think Louisiana. Like essay questions, these questions require more than just knowledge of the law. They often require the ability to read and manage complex text, and strange as it sounds, they often don't include a true correct answer. Way back when I took the Florida bar exam, I think it was about 3 million years ago, I got a piece of advice I still remember. On the MB, you're not looking for the right answer, you're looking for the best wrong answer. That's probably too strong, but it does convey something about the unique nature of law school multiple choice questions. So they are very different from what students are used to, both essays and multiple choice.
Okay. What is the best way for making notes in class for those classes that prohibit laptops?
Another good question. Well, the good news is, although there's no data, and many professors do ban laptops, I don't think the vast majority of them do. But even for those who do, there's actually research that suggests taking notes by hand is more effective than taking them on computer because it prevents students from being stenographers who simply try to write everything down without mentally processing it. On the other hand, I do think there is a danger in writing down too little when you're handwriting. 2 tips. First, try to write down anything that sounds like a rule or a sub-rule or an exception to a rule or sub-rule. I'm always a little bit worried when I'm saying in class the rule is, and I'm looking around to people who aren't writing it down because a lot of the rules don't come from the casebook. They do come from class. Second, because you can't write everything down and you don't want to. Fill in the gaps in your notes immediately after class while the material is fresh in your mind. Don't wait. Memory studies show that memory fades much more quickly than people realize.
Excellent. What is the best way to avoid feeling overwhelmed despite organization?
Yeah, these are great questions, all of them. First, I'd say understand that law school is, by its nature, a bit overwhelming at times. And that's normal, and you're normal if you feel that way. The one thing you cannot do is fall behind, because that will overwhelm any student in a very detrimental way. Because as I said, and I will repeat, it's not possible to play catch-up in law school. But in the meantime, surround yourself with good, positive-minded friends. You'll make a lot of them in law school. It's one of the greatest things about law school. Everyone's feeling overwhelmed together. People bond together in this trial by ordeal that is law school. Make time away from law school for yourself, with your loved ones. It can be done if you're organized. And again, when you're feeling overwhelmed, know that most people around you are also, even if they deny it. And finally, I guess I would say, remember, this too shall pass.
Very true. All right, next question is regarding case briefings. Some say that they're time-consuming or irrelevant for exams, but your book says they're important. So how would you balance your time or increase your quality of learning?
Case briefing is time-consuming. It is the unappreciated grunt work of a law student, no doubt. But those who say it's irrelevant are missing the main point of case briefing. For 1Ls especially, briefing cases is a principal way you learn to analyze law. Now, having said that, as I always advise, and modifying my other mantra, brief every case, but don't over-brief any case. A case brief should be brief, and as you become efficient at it, case briefing becomes much less time-consuming. The problem is, I think many students start out writing 3-page briefs, and it overwhelms them, and then they give up case briefing before they become efficient.
Okay, excellent. Assuming that there are few practice exams at one's own law school, what resources do you recommend to serve that same purpose?
Well, first of all, I'm glad the questioner recognizes the importance of working through practice exams. It's one of the best study mechanisms in law school. Hopefully you won't run into this problem. Every professor should make practice exams available, and don't hesitate to ask your professors about them. And without a doubt, the best exams to practice with are those written by your professors. If you don't get a lot of practice exams up front, don't be worried. You have to realize that you're not going to be equipped to be taking practice exams until you learn some law and develop the ability to analyze it. Some practice exams literally can't be taken effectively until classes end because they cover course material taught late in the semester. So for example, I will give a couple of practice exams during the first semester of torts, and then when classes are almost over, I'll release some previous exam questions. To release them earlier would just confuse students because we will not have covered, let's say, proximate cause yet, which is often a big issue on a torts exam. But apart from professor exams, there are many study aids out there with practice questions in them. There are so many, I'm honestly not familiar with them all. But most law school study aids these days are actually quite good because they're written by experienced professors, so be sure to stick to those.
Okay, great. Any advice for professionally conversing with the prestigious and renowned legal professionals that 1Ls will interact with?
Ah, yes. Always act professionally. Be respectful. Don't be overly familiar. Call people by their surnames, and unless and until they tell you otherwise, you cannot go wrong being too respectful. You can only go wrong the other way. In 1L of a Ride, I think I tell this story. We were 1 week into classes. This was at a different law school. And a student comes into my office, sits at the table in front of my desk, puts his feet on my desk and says, "So, Andrew, how do you see the year shaping up?" And he was like a kid, and I just looked at him like he was from Mars. So be respectful. And then mainly just be yourself. What you're going to find is that most lawyers and judges will want to help you. They remember what it was like to be in law school, and they enjoy meeting and working with law students.
Yes, very true. I agree with that. Okay, next question is, what are the top tips for what to include in your notes while trying to listen and absorb in class?
An excellent question and a difficult one to answer, in part because professors teach and test differently. But basically, generalizing, you want to capture anything resembling a rule or an exception to a rule. It's also a good idea to capture either during or after class the hypotheticals your professors use. These will help you understand how to apply the rules you're learning, which is the crucial thing you'll be tested on, your ability to apply law to facts. That's what we call analysis. What you usually don't need to write down and where you can sit back and enjoy the class is the back and forth policy discussions that occur in many law school classes.
Okay, thank you. How true is the notion that you can't do much aside from study in law school if you want good grades?
I would say both true and false. The top students work really, really hard. Make no mistake about that. But if you're efficient and organized, you can work hard, succeed, and still have a life. I did it, and I've known many, many successful students who have done likewise.
All right. What do the top students do differently in their exam answers to set themselves apart?
That's a hard one to answer in a short, succinct way. The short, succinct answer is they spot the issues, they truly understand the law and state it accurately, and most importantly, they engage in more accurate, specific, and deeper analysis than their classmates. And you might listen to that and say, well, that sounds simple. It's really not. It's a learning process for most students. Some people do have a natural knack for it, honestly. But for most students, it's a learning process. The book contains a lengthy chapter discussing the 15 most common mistakes students make in writing essay answers, which gives a lot of examples and much more detail than I could try to cover here.
Okay. What type of associations and groups are most beneficial to join?
Well, one of the great things about law school are the opportunities to participate in a wide variety of outside activities, such as different types of student organizations. Having said that, I advise saving them for your upper level years. As a 1L, keep your eye on the prize. Stay focused on your studies. Early grades have a disproportionate impact in law school. More and more, I see 1Ls getting sucked into too many extra activities that they used to be insulated from. And I also see the negative consequences of it on their performance. Those activities will still be there in your second and third years. Now, as an upper level student, I'd say join organizations that match your interests. Join organizations that give back to the community. Pay it forward. For resume building, activities like moot court, trial competitions, and especially law review are probably the most valuable. Let me mention this, and I'm biased because I'm the faculty advisor to the law review, but don't pass up the opportunity to participate on the law review, which at most students means competing in a summer write-on competition. Many students, who understandably are worn out after the first semester, skip the competition or don't finish it, and then they regret it. Law review is a particularly valuable resume credential.
Okay. One listener says, I've heard that law school should be treated like a full-time job. Are we talking 40 hours or 60 to 80?
I get that question a lot. They want a quantifiable answer. And of course there is not. But I would probably say in the 60 range, especially after your legal writing assignments kick in. I mean, let's put it this way. If you're not spending most of your time studying, including outlining and conducting periodic review during the semester, you're at risk of falling behind your classmates. But it doesn't mean you have to study all night. As I explained in the presentation, efficient students who approach law school like a full-time job can get their studying done and still have time to live a life.
Okay. Where do you obtain the most valuable course outlines for exam preparation?
Uh, that question, well, the answer is, that question suggests that the person who asked it probably needs to reevaluate their approach to law school. Because the answer is easy, through your own work. The best outlines are those you prepare, because it's the process of making an outline that makes it valuable. The students with the best outlines do well not because they possessed the best outlines, but because they made them. Making outlines and keeping them current forces you to synthesize the law you're learning and engage in periodic review. These are two crucial components of law school success. Often you won't realize what you don't understand until you try to outline it. So through your own work, that's my answer.
Very true. How can I balance law school and my personal life?
That is one of the most important questions. I'm so glad someone asked that. Several studies show law students suffer disproportionately high rates of psychological dysfunction, such as anxiety and depression. This is compared to the general population, but also to other graduate school populations, including medical students. The good news is that if you follow the C.R.E.D.O, you can be an excellent student and still have time for your outside life, which you need to make. You do need that work-life balance in law school and your career, and you need to make time for your loved ones. As I said in the presentation, by being efficient and organized, you can save time while still performing at a higher level than inefficient, unorganized students who work longer hours. So 1L of A.R.I.D. has a chapter devoted to maintaining well-being, and it really is an important area. It discusses tips that relate to keeping a good work-life balance, including not giving up your outside hobby, scheduling days and nights to take off and spend time with your loved ones. Things like that are very important.
Along that same lines, the next question is it possible to briefly address how these habits may work and or vary for single mothers of young children?
Wow. Well, a single mother of a young child who's going to law school probably has grit by definition, so that's a good starting point. But candidly, if you're a single parent of young children and you're attending law school full-time, everything is going to be harder. So it will be more important for you than maybe anyone to be efficient and organized, because you'll have more time demands placed on you. You'll need to schedule blocks of times where you can be alone and work on school without distractions. Anyone with kids knows how hard it is to get anything done when they're around. You'll almost have to have some kind of outside help, and I hope the person asking the question does have that kind of outside help, such as from family. Having said that, I've seen many single parents and many parents of children succeed in law school. I will say some of them opt for part-time rather than full-time. So that's something you might want to consider before you start, but especially if you don't have outside help. You're going to need some kind of outside help, I think.
Yep. How would you modify, if need be, the C.R.E.D.O habits for students with learning disabilities, such as ADD?
I'm glad you brought up, or the questioner brought up, learning disabilities. So let me say first, and most important, it's crucial to address any learning disabilities before you get to law school. Don't wait until you're not successful and then try to deal with them, as too many students do. Some students don't seek help for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is they're worried about being stigmatized. But there's no stigma to having a disability. So contact the university's disability office in advance and find out the steps you need to take to see if you're entitled to accommodations. Again, don't wait till after the fact. As to the actual substance of the question, I'd have to think about it a little more, but my first reaction is I would say don't modify the C.R.E.D.O at all. To the contrary, staying cognizant of the C.R.E.D.O may be extra important to you. Now, it may take more effort to follow through on that commitment. And frankly, for some students, and there's no shame in this either, it requires medication in addition to grit and determination.
Should I find a mentor practicing in the area of law that I'm interested in?
Well, don't worry about finding a subject matter specific mentor in your first year, certainly. Although I advise all students to make contact with a faculty member they like and respect who can serve as a kind of mentor. As you progress through law school, finding a mentor in an area in which you have a particular interest, whether a faculty member, outside lawyer, is a great idea and can definitely be helpful. Many local bar associations and some law schools have programs matching students with mentors. Also be aware, though, that if you have a particular interest in law school, you'd be surprised at the number of people who end up changing that interest once they get to law school and their eyes are open to all these other areas that they had not thought about before.
What is the best way to learn exam essay writing skills for someone with no experience in essay writing?
Oh, well, that's a tough one. I try to always be honest with students, and obviously it's not easy to learn writing skills in a hurry. Law school will help prepare you as you go along, especially in your legal writing courses. The best way to get a handle on and improve your law school essay writing skills is to take advantage of every possible practice exam your professors give you. And this goes for all students, even students who took a lot of essay exams in undergraduate school, because as we've talked about, law school essay exams are very different from anything students have seen before. And you'd be surprised how many students don't take advantage of specific practice exam opportunities. So for example, in the first semester I give an in-class practice exam. Later in the semester I hand out a much more complex, because the material gets more complex, practice exam. And I tell students to work it on their own, and if they do, they can get a full model answer to it. And it's dismaying to me that too many students do not follow through and take advantage of that opportunity. So in 1L of A.R.I.D., if you do have it, you can look in the appendix, and there's a lengthy multi-issue spotting, problem-solving torts question that I used on a real exam, and there's also an answer, so you can at least get a picture of what we're talking about. And again, there's also that chapter on the most common mistakes students make writing essay answers. I think that could be helpful.
Excellent, thank you. For our last question, it is, what is the best tip you can give a 1L student?
Hands down, and I know I've already said it, the single best and most important tip I can give is don't let yourself fall behind. It is the kiss of academic death. There is no catching up in law school. Let me say even one more time, there is no catching up in law school. One of the best tips I can give to help avoiding falling behind is to approach law school like a full-time job. And of course, as I've said several times, be consistent from beginning to end. If that's the end, I'd like to say thank you very much to everyone out there for listening to my webinar and for the excellent questions. I understand there were quite a few more questions, and I apologize we didn't have time to get to them all. Maybe that we can find a way to address them later. Good luck in law school. I always enjoy hearing from students, so don't hesitate to drop me an email, let me know how you're doing. Thank you, Emily, for your moderating. And to everyone, in the meantime, strap in and hold on. It's called 1L of A.R.I.D. for a reason.